Hello everyone, it's Kubac from LBP Union, back with yet another video tutorial. This time around I'm going to be explaining how you can dump a PlayStation 3 game using various methods so you can play those games on RPCS3, which is a PlayStation 3 emulator available on PCs. In this video I'm going to cover 5 possible methods of dumping a PlayStation 3 game, 4 of which require you to have a jailbroken PlayStation 3. The first 2 methods are going to involve around dumping a digital copy of the game from PlayStation 3, one using a USB stick and the other using the FTP or file transfer protocol. The next 3 methods involve dumping a disk copy of the game. The first one, once again, by using a USB stick to copy the contents of the disk into the USB stick. The second one is using the FTP access or file transfer protocol. And then if you don't have a jailbroken PlayStation 3 or you don't have a PlayStation 3 console at all, then you can use the last method, which is dumping a disk copy of the game into a PC using a Blu-ray disc reader. And then at the end of the video, I'm going to be also explaining how you can dump all the DLCs that you own from any LittleBigPlanet games into the PC as well. So without further ado, let's get on with the video tutorial. Okay, so for this method, you're going to need 2 of the things. One, which is what I stated previously, which is that you need to have a jailbroken PS3. If you haven't jailbroken your PlayStation 3 already, I have provided the exact steps of how you can install hybrid firmware on the Beacon PS3 tutorial. So if you are curious about how you can do that, you can check out that tutorial. And one more thing that you need is the USB drive, as it should be obvious already with this method. So I got this USB drive right here. As you can see, it says it's 16 gigabytes of storage. For the sake of the tutorial, I'm going to use LittleBigPlanet carding as an example for the game that you can dump and put in the RPCS3. But it can be any LittleBigPlanet game, any mainline LittleBigPlanet game, whether it will be 1, 2, or 3. It should be comfortably sit within this one USB drive. So if you have those 2 things ready, then I'm going to put this USB drive right here into my PC. There we go. And as you can see, this Explorer window has opened for us with the contents of the USB drive. As you can see, there's nothing there right now, which is perfectly fine. And now we're going to visit a link for the download of the Apollo Save tool. This is the tool that we're going to need in order to properly dump our digital copy of the game. Once again, I'm gonna put all the download links down the video's description. So now we're going to visit this website right here. And here we have the website where we can download the Apollo Save tool. We're going to go ahead and click download right here, and we save the .pkg file, and once that is downloaded, we're going to open the folder containing the downloaded pkg file, and then we're going to drag and drop this file onto our root USB destination right here. We drag and drop it here, and there we have it. Now we can exit out of the download folder, and then we can eject our USB device by right clicking it and then choosing the option eject. And now we can unplug the USB drive from our PC and then plug it in into our PS3 and then move on to our PS3. Now that we are on our PS3, we're going to need to now install this Apollo Save tool onto our PS3. And in order to do that, since we are on a hybrid firmware /PS3 hen, we're going to need to enable hen first. So we're gonna go ahead and scroll down to enable hen and press X to enable it. And once the PS3 hen is enabled, we're going to go ahead and scroll down till we go to Package Manager, then Install Package Files, then Standard. And then we're going to choose Apollo PS3.pkg .548 .pkg file that we just uploaded to our USB drive. We're going to go ahead and click X on that. And then once it is installed, we're going to back out. And this icon of the Apollo Save tool just showed up right here. Now, before we're going to use this tool, we're going to now go ahead and actually dump our digital copy of the game. We are going to use our example game here, which is LittleBigPlanet Karting digital version right here. And it weighs around 14 gigabytes, so the capacity of our USB drive should be enough for us to store this game. So we're going to go back up and then use MMCM in order to be able to copy all those files from the game into our USB drive. So now that we are on MMCM, we're going to need to press select and start simultaneously on our PS3 controller in order to go into the desktop view. Here we go, we have the desktop view right here. And now we're going to go into a PS3 root by using a right stick on our controller for navigating the cursor, and then we have it. Now we're going to go into the dev_hdd0 folder right here. This is our hard drive of our PS3. Then we're going to use a D-pad down in order to scroll down till we find the game folder, which is right here. And then we're gonna need to find the game serial for that game. In my case, since I'm using a LittleBigPlanet karting as an example, it's going to be NPA00421. We're going to double click X on that folder. And then if you want to double check if it is a correct game folder, you can visit this, you can double click on this icon, a 0.png file, and as you can see, we have the LittleBigPlanet karting logo right here, so we know this is the exact files we're looking for. So now we're going to back out one directory above using the double dot folder right here, and then we're going to go back to our NPA00421 folder right here, and then we're going to need to press circle. And then we're going to choose the option copy, press X to confirm the option. As you can see on the top right screen, we see the MMOS clipboard notification that it notified that it has successfully added this folder to our clipboard. Now we're going to have to go back by using a D-pad to go up all the way to this double dot folder right here to go back up one directory. And we're going to need to do it one more time to back out of the hard drive. And then we're going to need to find the dev_USB 000 or 001, which is our USB drive, as you can see right here. And we have this Apollo.pkg file that we just downloaded. Since we don't need it anymore because we've already installed it, we're going to now go ahead and press circle on that. And then we're going to scroll down till we go till we reach the option delete, and we press X to delete our file. And we press yes to confirm the deletion of that file. And now we have our empty drive right here where we can dump our digital copy of the game. Now that we are on this USB drive right here, we're going to press circle, and then we choose an option paste. Press X to confirm, and then do you want to copy the selected folders? We're going to confirm our option and hit yes. Now it's going to verify data, and now it is copying files. This process will be a pretty lengthy one, depending on which game you're copying. It might take 1 hour up to 2 hours, but yeah, once that is done, I'm going to just skip through this process and be there with you guys once that is done. And now that we have successfully copied all the files from the game right here, we have the NPA00421 folder on our USB stick right here. And now we're going to go ahead and exit out of the MMCM by pressing the PlayStation button on our controller and then choosing an option quit game. And now that we've backed out of the MMCM back to our PlayStation 3 menu, we're going to now go ahead and launch the Apollo Save tool. This is the tool that we just installed. Now we're going to go ahead and click X to run it. Now it says that it's extracting files, and here we have Apollo Save Tool main menu right here. So the reason why we need Apollo Save Tool is because alongside the contents of the digital copy of the game, we also need to retrieve its license. So in order to do that, we're going to need to go all the way to User Tools. And now we need to scroll down till we find the option Export Licenses. This is going to take a while because it's going to look for all the licenses that we have installed on our PlayStation 3. So now we're going to scroll all the way down till we find the license file for our game. Here it is, we found it right here, NPEA00421. We're going to go ahead and press X on this file, and then we're going to choose to save that wrap file to USB 1. As you can see, it has successfully copied the data to dev_USB01 X data. We're going to press OK. And now we're going to back out of this menu, and then we're going to once again press PlayStation button on our controller to exit out of the Apollo Save tool. We go ahead and press quit game, click yes. And now we can unplug our USB drive from our PlayStation 3 and plug it back to our PC. And then we're gonna move on to our PC. So now that we have successfully transferred game files from our PS3 into our USB drive and then moved our USB drive from PS3 over to our PC, As you can see, once again, the USB drive contents folder has automatically showed up, and then we can move this window aside and then move on to our RPCS3 instance. I have this test instance prepared for the sake of the tutorial. Okay, so we're in the instance of the RPCS3 where we want to put our game. We're gonna go over into def_htt0, then game, and this is where we drag and drop this folder right here. And it's obviously going to take a while depending on how big the game is. And now once that is done, copying the folder containing the game from our USB drive over to our RPCS3 instance. And now we can go into RPCS3 to check if this game is now listed. And as you can see, it showed up right here. However, if you try to run it now, you will see the message that the digital content cannot be decrypted, and this is usually caused by a missing or invalid license or RAP file. And it makes sense because we have yet to include our licenses that we also exported using the Apollo save tool. So we go back to our RPCS3 instance folder, we go to def_htt0, we go into home, we go into this folder right here, and then xdata. And then we go back to our USB drive, we go into xdata, and then drag and drop this RAP file that we have exported using the Apollo save tool. And then we go back to our RPCS3, and the game should now start. And there we have it. We will have the game have its PPU modules compiled, and then eventually the game will run. And as you can see, the game has actually started and we are getting into the game. Now, as you can see, some games require some additional settings in the custom game config. So as you can see, the game doesn't necessarily render the default settings, but this isn't going to be the scope of this video. I'm going to be making another video in the meantime as of what are the best settings for each LittleBigPlanet game. So I'm just gonna go ahead and go into the next method of dumping the game. So this is a method of copying the digital copy of the game from your PlayStation 3 using the FTP or file transfer protocol. In order for this method to work, you're going to need a jailbroken PlayStation 3. If you haven't jailbroken your PlayStation 3 already, I recommend checking out the Beacon PS3 tutorial that is also available in this LPP Union channel. But aside from having to have a jailbroken PlayStation 3, you also will need to have something called Apollo save tool. So in case if you don't have this tool installed, we're going to quickly enable our hands for a second. And now that we have our hand enabled, we're going to go ahead and visit the internet browser. And we're going to press start to open up the address bar. And then we're going to insert the link for the download of the Apollo save tool, which is this one right here, store.brewology.com/ahomebrew.php brew ID equals 321. You're going to need to insert this URL and press start to visit this website. As you can see, this website shows up with the download link of the Apollo save tool. We're going to go ahead and click download. And now we can specify where this BKG file needs to be downloaded. We're going to go ahead and go into def_htt0, then hover over down into packages, and then press D-pad to the right to go into the OK, and press OK to download the file. And once that is downloaded, we can back out of the screen right here and then press circle once more to exit out of the browser. Now we can head over to game and then go into package manager. Then we go into install package files. Then we go into PlayStation 3 system storage. And then we have this apollo.pkg file that we have just downloaded right here. We click X to install it. And here we have it installed. We have the Apollo save tool right here. So before we move on to our PC, in order to connect to our PS3 using FTP client, we're going to need to open up the Apollo save tool. There we go, the Apollo save tool has opened and now it's extracting files. There we go, we have successfully installed local application data. We click OK. We have the menu of the Apollo save tool right here. So now the reason why we need Apollo save tool is because we need to export the license file, which is used to authenticate our copy of the game that we downloaded using the PlayStation Store. So we need to go all the way to user tools, and then we need to scroll down till we find export licenses, and then we need to find the corresponding license for the particular game. In my cases, we are using LittleBigPlanet karting as an example for the game that we're going to dump. Then we're going to scroll down till we find the serial ID of the game that we're looking for. And there we have it. We have the license file right here for the game that has the serial ID NPA00421. This is the exact same serial ID which my copy of LittleBigPlanet karting digital version uses. So we're going to go ahead and press X. Then we're going to go ahead and choose the option save.wrap to HDD. This is going to save our wrap file that we're going to need to export as well into our hard drive on our PS3. We click OK to accept the message. Then we can bulk out of this Apollo Save tool by pressing a PS button on our controller, and then we choose to quit game. And we select yes to quit the game. And there we have it. Now you should be ready to transfer this file over to PC. Just in case if you don't have the Webman tools installed, we could also go to MMCM right here. And depending on whether you have this desktop view open or if you have a regular XMP like view open, you can press select and start and to switch back between those two. We're going to go into the XMP view, so this screen right here, and then to make sure that we have an FTP access enabled, we're going to go all the way to the settings, then go into the FTP service option, and then make sure to set it as enable no timeout. And now once that is done, we're going to also need to find out what is the IP address of our console. In that case, we can just go into system information, and then we have the IP address of our PlayStation 3 console right here. Write it out somewhere because we're going to need it in order to be able to connect to our PS3 using the FTP client. So now we're going to go into our PC. So now that we are on our PC, we can use any of the FTP clients available for Windows or Linux, depending on like whichever operating system you are, of course. In my case, I'm going to use FileZilla. If you don't have a FileZilla installed or any other FTP client, then I recommend downloading FileZilla. The link for that software is going to be down in the video description, but I already have it installed, so I'm just open it real quick. So here is, we have the FileZilla window right here, and before we're going to connect to our PlayStation 3 using the FTP client, there will be some few things that you need to configure in order to make sure that the FTP transfer is as most reliable as possible. In my case, I personally use these settings. So when you go to edit settings, there's a few things that you need to configure. I personally use these kind of settings. So here's the connection page. In here, you're gonna make sure that the timeout is set to 90 seconds. That's because sometimes, at least in my case, PlayStation 3 tends to randomly disconnect by attempting to like download a huge bunch of small files. Down here in the reconnection settings, I recommend setting it to 99, which is like the maximum possible. So it will keep trying, it will eventually, reconnect. In the between the failed login attempts, I'm recommending setting to something like 30. And then down here we go to FTP. So in most guides, when it comes to using the FTP client on a PS3, people recommend use active transfer mode. It may be true for your case, however, I personally use passive mode because for whatever reason, this has been most reliable mode for me when it comes to transferring the game files from my PS3 over to my PC. So I'm just gonna keep it at that. Whenever you're having issues with like the active transfer mode, I would recommend switching back to passive. And then you want to make sure that the send FTP keep alive command option is checked. When you go into transfers, you want to make sure that transfers are all set to 1, and then optionally you can also enable speed limits. I set it to 9 megabytes per second as it is the most optimal speed for the FTP for the PS3. And now that we have all these settings checked out, we're gonna go ahead and click OK. And now we can proceed to connect to our PlayStation 3 console by typing down in the host text field the IP address that we just read from our PlayStation 3 console. In our case, it's going to be 192.168.0.64. And now we're just going to need to click connect. As you can see, we have successfully connected to our PlayStation 3. We can see the root directory of our PlayStation 3 console. Now we can start transferring our files right here. In order to download the game from our PS3 to PC, all the games that are installed from on our PS3 are stored in dev_hdt0. So we're just gonna expand this. Then we're gonna head over to game. This is the directory where all the games are stored, as you can see right here. And then you're going to need to find the game serial ID. In my case, since I'm using LittleBigPlanet karting digital version as an example, and then in my case it's going to be NPEA 00421. And if you want to double check if this is the correct game serial ID, In most case scenarios, the directory will also contain the icon0.png file. So if you want to check it out, you can just kind of drag and drop it anywhere. For example, to the downloads folder. And then if you open the icon.png, you can see the logo of the game right here. Now we're positive that this is the game install of LittleBigPlanet karting. So now that we have localized our game install folder / directory, and now we can move on to the left side, which is our PC, and then go into our RPCS3. And then we're just gonna go through the same directory, which is dev_hzt0, then game, and then all we need to do is now drag and drop this entire directory onto our PC. As you can see down here, it will start transferring the files over to our PC. Once it's done transferring the files of the game from our PS3 to our PC directly into the RPCS3 folder, now we can see if the RPCS3 actually detects the game. So it should list in the game list. So now I'm going to go into our RPCS3 instance that I prepared specifically for this video, and we're gonna launch rpcs3.exe. And as you can see, the game does in fact show up. However, if you try to run it, it's going to say that digital content could not be decrypted. This is usually caused by a missing or invalid license wrap file in parentheses. Well, that means we still haven't imported our license that we exported using the Apollo Save tool. So in order to import that file, we're going to go back to FileZilla, and then we're going to go back one directory above by double clicking the double folder. Then we're going to do it once more. Okay, and now we're going to head over to the xdata folder / directory. And then here we have a wrap file that we just exported. This is our license file that we need for the game to launch on RPCS3. In order to import it to RPCS3, you're going to go back a folder and then go to home directory. Then we have the 0000001 directory. We're going to open that one. And then we're going to open the xdata directory. And in here, we drag and drop this wrap file that we just exported into RPCS3 right here. So now once that is done, we should now be able to run the game. As you can see, it booted up the game successfully, and now it's compiling for shaders. And as you can see, it booted up just fine. Now, as you can see, in some cases, like in here in LittleBigPlanet karting, the default settings might not be enough to run the game properly. You'll have to check your game configuration for each and every game, but I will have a different tutorial for that. So now we're going to move on to the next method. So for this method, we're going to need a jailbroken PlayStation 3. If you haven't jailbroken a PlayStation 3 already, I highly recommend checking out the Beacon PS3 tutorial on this LBP Union YouTube channel. You're also going to need a USB drive that is compatible with the PS3. I have this one right here that is 16GB storage. That should be more than good enough for any of the LBP games that you want to dump. And also you need to make sure that this USB is prepared so PS3 can recognize it. So that means it has to be formatted using the MBR partition table, and it also needs to be formatted using the FAT32 file system. If any of these is missing, PlayStation 3 is not going to recognize it. So if you want to know how to format USB like that, then once again I suggest checking out the Beacon PlayStation 3 tutorial on this YouTube channel, so you know how to prepare this USB drive properly. Once you have those two things, we're gonna go ahead and plug in our USB drive onto our PS3 right here. There we go. And now we're gonna move on to our PS3. Now that we are on our PlayStation 3, depending on whether you have a CFW or hybrid firmware, and then obviously in the case of hybrid firmware you need to have PlayStation 3 hand enabled first. We're going to do just that. There we go. And now in our case we are going to be using LittleBigPlanet 2 on disk that we are going to dump on our PlayStation 3. So now that we have PS3 hand enabled, we're going to go ahead and launch MMCM. Now we are on MMCM. Now depending on whether MMCM launches in this screen right here or this desktop screen right here, you want to make sure that you want to stay in this desktop view, but in case if you end up being in this screen right here, this view, all you need to do is to press, select and start simultaneously on the controller, and then you will be able to switch back and forth between the previous screen to this desktop view right here. You're going to need to be in this desktop view right here. Next step is to go into PS3 root. Now initially when MMCM launches, it doesn't actually detect the disk yet, but that's fine. All we need to do here is to to eject our disk, which I'm going to do now, and then reinsert it. And then, as you can see, the def_b_dvd directory appeared in our root directory. So now if you head over to this def_b_dvd directory right here by double clicking X, as you can see, we have quite a few things. We have the PS3 Extra, PS3 Game, and PS3 Update. LittleBigPlanet 2 is actually a perfect case scenario where I can show you what you can do if you don't exactly have the USB drive that has enough capacity to store the entire contents of a game. So first we're going to ignore pretty much all the contents except for PS3_game. The reason why is because first PS3_extra directory only really has like the additional stuff such as the sign-in PlayStation Network tutorials. We obviously not really going to need that. All we care about really is to dump our LittleBigPlanet 2 copy of the game, which isn't here, but it is instead if you go back up the directory by double clicking the double dot entry right here, and then we head over to PlayStation 3_game, and this is where our game actually resides. Now, I'm going to reiterate once again, our USB drive isn't unfortunately sizable enough to store all the files in one go, so we're going to need to move our USB drive back and forth, but this is fine because we only really going to need to do it once for most of the files, and then the remaining file we're going to transfer it the second time. So the first big chunk of files we're going to copy by selecting all these directories by just simply pressing X button on them once, and then we're going to copy every single file here, and then press the button if you check if there's any other files below. We don't have any. Okay, so now we're going to press circle and then copy. We have the message that has successfully added those items to the clipboard. We go back up a directory by double clicking the double dot directory, and then we go back once more. And now we need to look for the USB drive that we just connected to our PS3 as well, which is in our case def_USB001. We double click that, and then we're going to create our folder here first. So let me just press circle and then choose an option, create a new folder. We're just going to call this folder LBP2, it doesn't really matter. And then we double click on that LB2 folder that we just created, and we have the empty folder right here. And then we're going to press circle once again and then click paste. Yes. And now we have those files right here. And next we're going to need to press circle. We're going to create a new folder, and then in all caps USRDIR, so user directory. We press start and then press square so we don't accidentally create a white space after that. Press start, and then we have the directory created. This is the second directory that we're going to move our next files to. So we're going to go back to our Blu-ray drive right here, the def_b_dvd. We're going back to PS3_game, and then we're going to USRDIR, so user directory once more, and then we're going to copy it in a way that we're going to have everything except for data.farc for now, obviously, because we're going to need this file anyway, but for the sake of being able to fit it in the first go, we're going to copy all of the files except for this one for now. So once again, we're going to select every single file except for data.farc with a single press of the X button. Now we press circle, we press copy, and then we go back once again to def_USB001 to LBP2, the directory that we just created, USR directory once again, and then we're going to paste these files right here. This time around is going to take a bit of time because we do have 13.8 gigabytes of data that we need to copy over. So I'm just gonna skip through this process, and then we're going to continue on with copying our files. Now that we have our first batch of files of the game moved over to our USB, we're going to now need to unplug our USB and move it to our PC. And now on our PC we have plugged in the USB drive that we just reconnected from our PS3 to our PC, and we have the LBP2 folder that we just created, and we're just going to put it in our PC. It can be really anywhere we want, and our case is going to be next to our RPCS3 instance, and once again it can be literally anywhere. So let me just drag and drop this folder here and then let it copy. Now that we are done with copying the files over from the USB drive to our chosen destination or PC, we can remove this folder. However, we are not yet done with transferring all the game files because we're still missing that one file that I told you about, and once it removes all these files from the USB drive, we're going to move on back to our PS3. There we go, we have our files removed from our USB drive. Now we can go back to our PC, eject the drive, and then we can now unplug our USB drive and then plug it back to our PS3. Now we move back to our PS3. And now that we are back again on our PS3, we're going to need to open up the PS3 root in the MMCM application that we still had open. And then we're going to need to once again go back to dev_b DVD and go back to PS3 game and then go back to ESR dir. And then we need to copy that one remaining file, which is data.farc. We're going to need to press circle and then select copy, go back to our root directory of our PS3 and then scroll down to we find dev_USB001, which is our USB drive, and then press circle here and then click paste. We want to confirm that copy this file. Once that is done, we need to copy yet another file, which is back on our Blu-ray drive. So we need to go back to dev_b DVD right here, and then we have this file right here, which is ps3_disc.sfb. We're going to need to select that using the X button, then press circle and then click copy. We go back to our directory using the double dots and then we go back to dev_USB001 and then we press circle and paste the file here. And now that we have both of these files, we can now unplug our USB drive and then plug it in back on our PC right here. And then we have once again our USB drive. We have those two files right here, data.farc and ps3_disc.sfb. Before we move those files back to our dump of a game on our PC, we're going to need one more thing, which is first we're going to need to create a new folder. I will call it games. This is the place where we'll be able to put all the disk dumps of the games. So we're going to now drag and drop this LPP2 folder that we just created for the game into games. Then we're going to need to open up a LPP2 folder right here, and in here we're going to create one more folder called ps3_game, all in caps. This is going to be important, otherwise RPCS3 is not going to recognize the game. And then all these files except for ps3_game we're going to need to put in this directory right here. And now we have this ps3_game, we're going to open that. And then we're going to need to go into USR dir directory, and this is where we're going to put our last remaining file. This is the exact same location that we took this data.farc file, so we're going to need to copy in here. Okay, we have this file copied. Now we will have to back out of the USR dir directory and then back of the ps3_game directory, and in here next to the folder, we're going to need to put the ps3_disc.sfb file. And once that is done, we can now safely eject our USB drive since we're not going to need it anymore. And now, since we have our game dump, we can now add it to our RPCS3. For this, we're going to use my RPCS3 instance, and then we're going to open up RPCS3. And in here in RPCS3, all you need to do to add the disk copy of the game is to go to File, Add Games, we back out of the RPCS3 directory, then we visit the games, and then we choose LPP2 folder that we prepared for our game, and then we select folder. As you can see, it says that we successfully added software to the game list. We can click OK, and now we can open up the game to see if it boots up. As you can see, it starts compiling the PPU modules, so after it's done doing that, as you can see, the game boots up just fine, and we will eventually get in the game. The game crashed right here, but as you can see, the game is recognized by RPCS3 and boots up, and I'm pretty sure if you were to boot this game again, it would go through just fine. We'll probably need to update it anyway, but that's not really the scope of this tutorial. Now we're going to move on to the next method. This next method is to do with dumping our PlayStation 3 disc copy of the game using our PS3 and then over the FTP access or the file transfer protocol. In this case, I am going to use a LittleBigPlanet 2 disc copy of the game. It can be any PlayStation 3 game. I'm just using this one as an example. The first thing we need to do is once again we need to have a jailbroken PlayStation 3. If you haven't jailbroken your PlayStation 3 already, you're going to need to follow the tutorial patching LittleBigPlanet games on PS3 in order to find out how to jailbreak the PlayStation 3, how to turn your PS3 into a hybrid firmware. You can also use CFW for that. It's fine either way. But since we are on a hybrid firmware, you're going to obviously need to enable hen first. And now that we have hen enabled, we are going to need to do one more thing, which is to go into MMCM And now that we are on an MMCM, depending on how you boot up the MMCM, you're going to see either this desktop view right here, or this XMP view right here. You're going to need to be in this exact view. If you for the reason boot up into the desktop screen, all you need to do is to press select and start on the controller, and it will put you right here. So on this screen, you need to go all the way to the settings, then go into the FTP servers, and you want to make sure this one is set to enable no timeout. And once that is done, we also need to figure out our IP address of our console. We need to go up into system information, and as you can see, it displays us right here the IP address that we're looking for, which is 192.168.0.64. Write it down somewhere because we're going to need this IP address in order to connect to our PS3 using the FTP client on our PC. So now we're going to move on to our PC. Now that we are on our PC, we are obviously going to need to have an FTP client installed on our PC. In my case, I'm going to be using FileZilla, so if you don't have any FTP client available in your PC, I recommend getting a FileZilla. Link for the download of the program is down in the video description. Now we're going to open FileZilla. And before we go ahead and open up the FTP connection to our PS3, we're going to need to check a few things. We want to make sure that we have the FileZilla configured properly, so the transfer of the files is going to be as reliable as possible. For this, we're going to need to go into edit settings, and in here you want to make sure that the timeout is set to 90 seconds. It can be larger, which will be safer depending on what PS3 you have. In my case, it's going to be 90 seconds. And in the connection settings, we're going to need to choose the maximum amount of the numbers of retries, and then delay between failed login attempts. We're going to choose 30 seconds. You can set it larger, once again, depending on your PS3, but these settings will be fine for us. And now moving on to FTP. In most case scenarios, you would probably want to choose the active transfer mode, but in my case, for the reason passive mode works better, so I'm just going to leave it at passive. If you have issues with the passive, I recommend switching it back to active. When you go into transfers, you want to make sure that transfers are all set to 1. And then optionally, you can also enable speed limits. I set it to 9 megabytes per second, as it is the most optimal speed for the FTP for the PS3. And now that we have all these settings checked out, we're going to go ahead and click OK. And now in order to connect to our PS3 using the FTP access that we just enabled using MMCM, we're going to need to insert our IP address of our console. So in our case, it's going to be 192.168.0.64, and we leave username as password as blank, and then we choose quick connect. And we have successfully connected to our PS3 using the FTP client. Now the next thing that you need to do is to make sure that the MMCM sees the disk of the game. So I'm just going to eject and reinsert the disk, and once that is done, we're going to press F5 on our keyboard to refresh it. And as you can see, we have the def_bdvd directory show up right here, and then we have the contents of our disk. Now we're going to need to dump it somewhere. I was just gonna use this one directory used for the RPCS3. We're going to create a directory. It can be anywhere. It can be on desktop, it can be on documents, it's whatever. We're going to add a directory that is specifically for storing our disk copies of the game. So in our case, I'm just gonna type it games, hit enter, we click OK. Then we go into games, and I'm gonna create another directory. I'm just gonna call it LBP2. It's whatever. Press OK. This is where we're gonna put all the contents of the disk. So now that we have this directory open right here, in the case of LittleBigPlanet 2, you don't necessarily have to copy all the files, because you have something like PS3_extra, and this is the place where you have all tutorials for like in all various languages on how to sign in to PlayStation Network. You don't necessarily need to copy these files, because if you want to only play the game, you don't necessarily need those. So we're gonna back out of this. And then we also have the PS3_update, which for whatever reason doesn't have anything here, but we're just going to focus on transferring the PS3_game and then PS3_disk.sfb. We need to have both of these transferred over the FTP client into our destination directory that we specified. And as you can see, it has started copying the files over to our PC. The time it takes for the FTP client to copy all these files obviously depends on how big the game is and the speed of the transfer because it can vary depending on if your PS3 connected to Wi-Fi or not. I recommend plugging in the PS3 into a wired network and not wireless, so it will be more reliable when it comes to transferring the files. But now I'm just going to skip through this process and skip to when it's done uploading these files to my PC. Once it's done transferring the game files, as you can see, we have the PS3_game and PS3_disc.sfb file. Now we can close out of FileZilla, and now we can move on to our RPCS3 instance. I have prepared the RPCS3 instance for this tutorial right here. We're going to open up this folder and we're going to open RPCS3. And now in order to add the disk copy of the game that we just dumped, all we need to do is to go into File, then Add Games. We're gonna back out of the RPCS3 folder and then go into the games and select the LPP2 folder. It sent me a message that it has successfully added software to the game list. Now we can press OK, and then we can boot up the game and see if it's booting up correctly. As you can see, it starts by compiling the PPU module, so it's gonna take a while. Once it's done, it's going to go over into the game, as you can see, and as you can see, the game boots up just fine. So we have successfully dumped our PlayStation 3 disc copy of the game. As you can see, since we haven't really dumped our own game profile, then it's going to go through the setup process. But yeah, well, the game crashed, but it will most likely be fixed after the next reboot of the game. But after that, the game will most likely boot up just fine. But yeah, it's also going to most likely require you to update the game. But this isn't the scope of the video. Now we're just going to move on to our next method. Okay, so what if you don't have a PlayStation 3 and you have a disc copy of a game like here? We have LittleBigPlanet 2, this version of the game right here, but you don't have a PlayStation 3, but you still want to dump the game and be able to play it on RPCS3. Well, there is one way to do that, and that is to dump the game using a Blu-ray disc reader. I have one right here, which is, if you look at the model of it, it is BP55EB40, which is the Blu-ray disc reader that is listed as one of the compatible ones according to the RPCS3 website. So we can use this Blu-ray disc reader right here. It's the external one, meaning that we can plug it in using the USB connector right here. So if you have this and you have a PC that you can hook it up to, then we can dump the game disc that way. So let me just plug in this Blu-ray disc reader right here to one of the available USB ports, and as you can see, the Blu-ray drive popped up right here on our screen. So now we can open up this box containing the game. As you can see, we have the disc of LittleBigPlanet 2. So now we're just going to need to pop that disc tray open on our Blu-ray drive, Blu-ray reader, and then we're gonna put this LPP2 disc instead of this Blu-ray disc reader, and then we're gonna close it. And as you can see, the disc opened up just fine. As you can see, we have the contents of PlayStation 3 game right here. Normally what you would do is to copy and paste all these files to the PC, but by default the PlayStation 3 discs are encrypted. What it means is that if you don't decrypt these game files first, then if you try to run the game directly with these files using RPCS3, then RPCS3 isn't going to read this game. It's going to fail to boot. So for this, we're going to need to download the PS3 Disc Dumper from the GitHub page. Once again, I'm going to be putting a link down in the video description. So we open up this GitHub page, and as you can see, we have the PS3 Disc Dumper right here. We go over to releases, and then we have this latest release right here. All we need to do is to download the zip file according to the operating system that we use. In my case, since we have Windows, I'm going to pick PS3 Disc Dumper Windows.zip, and then we can download it everywhere. It can be right here as well. And once that is done, we're going to open the folder containing this downloaded zip file, and I'm just going to drag and drop this zip file using the right mouse button, and then choose 7-zip because we can use 7-zip to extract the content, and then we're going to extract the folder right here, and then we have the PS3 Disc Dumper right here. So we just need to open up this tool. As you can see, it's gonna start scanning the disk drives, and then it's looking for a disk key that's hopefully gonna find automatically. And now we're ready to dump. We can now dump the game that we have detected. If you wanna specify the location where you want the game to be dumped into, we need to go over to this settings icon right here, and then if you want to change the location of the disk dump and the key copies, then we can just use this 3 dots button right right here, we click onto that, and then we can specify where we want disk dump exported into. So I'm just going to use my tutorial folder for the sake of this video, and then we're gonna create a new folder called games. Open up that folder, and we're going to select this folder to dump the games inside here. So now we're going to go back, and now that we're ready to dump, we can just go ahead and click start. And as you can see, it starts copying the files sector by sector. So it's going to dump the entire contents of the disk. So I'm just going to skip this process and move on to the point where it's finished dumping the game disk. And now, as you can see, it says right here that the files are decrypted and copied, and then we can close out of the PS3 Disc Dumper. And now we can move on to opening this game on RPCS3. So for this, we're going to go into my RPCS3 instance that I prepared specifically for this tutorial. So it's right here, RPCS3. And then we open up RPCS3, and then in order to open up the disk copy of the game that we just dumped onto our PC using our Blu-ray drive is simply by going into File, Add Games, and then we back out of the RPCS3 directory, and then we go into destination of our disk dump right here, which is Games, and then we have LittleBigPlanet 2U, so we just select this folder and we select it, and we have, as you can see, successfully added software to the game list. So we can click OK, and now we can boot up the game. It's asking whether you want to install this package. So when it comes to LittleBigPlanet 2, it also contains the Sackboy's prehistoric moves. I'm just gonna ignore this, say no. But as you can see, it is beginning to compile the PPU modules. So once that is done, and once that is done, as you can see, it is booting up the game just fine. Obviously, since we don't have any profile imported, it's just going to start the game as if you were started the game for the very first time. And while the game crashed, I'm assuming it's probably because we have to update the game first, which isn't going to be the focus of this video. But as you can see, the game has been recognized by RPCS3 and we were able to boot into it. So all the necessary stuff that you need to do after is beyond the scope of this video. But yeah, this was the last method that allows you to dump the copy of the game into the PC so you can play it on RPCS3. Now, if you own any DLC on your PS3 and you want to transfer them over to your PC to RPCS3, you can use two methods. I'm going to show the USB one, the one using the USB stick. But you can also use the FTP transfer that I showcased in one of the methods. If you want to know how to do it over the FTP instead, then refer to that method instead. But for now, we're going to use our trusty USB method because I believe it's going to be more reliable in this case. But yeah, without further ado, first we're going to obviously need to plug in our USB drive, which should be already available right here. We have the USB drive right here. Once again, if you want to know how to prepare USB drive so it'll be recognizable by the PS3, once again, you need to have the USB partition table formatted as MBR and then file system formatted as FAT32. Both of these things need to be checked. Otherwise, if it's any different than that, then PS3 is not going to recognize the USB drive. So now that you make sure that you have the USB formatted correctly, we're going to also need Apollo Save Tool. This is the tool that allows us to dump the licenses for the DLCs, which we're going to need to transfer over our RPCS3. So I'm going to open up the link for the download of the Apollo Save Tool. Once again, the link for that is going to be down in the video description. And in here, all you need to do is to click download. And then you can save the file anywhere. And then once it's done downloading the file, we can open up the folder containing the PKG file that we just downloaded. And now all we need to do now is to drag and drop this file to our USB drive like so. And now that we have our file transferred over, we can now move on to our PS3. We can first eject our drive that we just transferred our PKG file to, and I'm gonna unplug it and then plug it to my PS3 and then turn it on. And now that we are on our PS3, we are obviously going to need to have a jailbroken one. Whether it's a HFW or CFW, doesn't really matter. In our case, since we are using hybrid firmware, we're obviously going to need to enable hand first. So we're going to do just that. And once that is done, we already have the Apollo Save Tool installed. But if you didn't have one, so let me just remove it real quick. If you want to install Apollo Save Tool using our USB drive, then we have to have the USB drive plugged into our PS3. And then we go over to Package Manager, Install Package Files, Standard. And then we have the Apollo PS3 Save Tool right here. We're going to need to press X to install it. There we go, the install has been completed. And now as you can see, we have this tool right here. So we're going to open that one first. And now that we are on Apollo Save tool, we need to go over to user tools and then scroll down till we find export licenses option. And then what we need to do is to choose the option export all licenses as wraps, and then we can choose to save all those wrap files over to USB. I should probably have it on USB 1, so let me just select this one option. And now that we have all the licenses transferred over, it says right here we have successfully copied all the files to this specified location. We're going to go ahead and click OK. And then one more thing that we need to do is that if you have multiple accounts and from which all these accounts also have DLCs purchased from them, then you need to quit the game here, then move on to different accounts on your PS3. So, for example, if you have a secondary account, there's only one DLC that I own here, but just to give you a proof that this is going to list you another set of DLCs, the DLCs that are specifically tied to this account. And then we're gonna do the same steps that we did with our previous account. We'll just go to user tools, export licenses. As you can see, we have 3 of them here, but as you can see, these are different ones. So if you have other accounts, then you want to make sure that you go through all of them and do these exact same steps in order to export these licenses. So once again, we're gonna do export all licenses and then save wraps to USB 1. And as you can see, I have successfully copied all these licenses. So you want to make sure that you do this with all the accounts, as long as these accounts also have the DLC that you own. Once that you're done exporting all the DLCs from each account, then we are going to go back to our primary one. And then now we need to do one more thing, which is to export the EDAT files, which are the files that LittleBigPlanet games use in order to actually install these DLCs into the game install, so the game actually recognizes that you do have them. So for this, we're going to scroll down until we find MMCM. And now that we are on MMCM, depending on if you're in this view or if you're in this desktop screen right here, you want to make sure that you're on this desktop view right here. In case if you're on this default XMP view right here, you want to make sure that you switch back to the desktop screen by pressing select and start on your controller simultaneously. So we're just going to do just that. And there we have it. We are on the desktop now. Now we need to go into PS3 root by using a right stick to control the mouse. Now we press X twice to open up the PS3 root directory. And we need to go to def_hdd0, and in here we need to go into game. And now depending on which region of the game there is installed in your when it comes to LittleBigPlanet games, you'd have to look for the specific serial IDs. I'm just gonna list all of the serial IDs for each game that you need to look for. Let me just start off with LittleBigPlanet 1. So for LittleBigPlanet 1, it is going to be BCES00141 DLC 0. So this is where we have all the DLCs stored for this particular game. So if you go to user directory, here we have all the DLCs for this particular game. So for this, we're going to go back and then select this directory right here, press circle, and then we choose an option copy, and then we go back to the root directory by using the double dot directory, and then we do that once more to go back to the root. And then we need to look for the USB drive in the root directory. In our case, once again, it's going to be def_USB001. We double click that, and we want to press circle here, and then we'll choose the option paste. And we want to confirm that you want to copy the selected folder. And as you can see, it has successfully copied this entire folder. So the next one is going to be the DLCs for LittleBigPlanet 2. For this, we're going to go back to def_hdd0, then game. Then we need to go to BCS00850 DLC. So this is my case. This is the case of my copy of the game. It's going to be that. Then USR dir for, once again, checking if you have any DLCs in here. As you can see, we do. So we go back up the directory, and then we want to go back one directory up, and then we need to once again select this folder BCES00850 DLC 0, and then press circle, and then we choose the option copy. We once again go back to our root directory using the double dots, and then back to our USB drive, and then we press circle here, and then we choose an option paste. Yes, we want to confirm. And finally, for the LittleBigPlanet 3 DLC is going to be once again def_hdd0, then game, and then it should be BCS01663 if you go to USR directory. And as you can see, it's kind of a mess around here because as you can see, LittleBigPlanet 3 actually stores all those DLCs in the exact same directory as the game itself. So we were just going to need to So we're going to need to select all those edat files themselves. So let me just select the ghost costume here, then hook hat, and then all the files that end with .edat. Press that, select copy, and then, I mean, if you don't have any game installed, you might as well straight up copy the entire directory. So I'm just gonna do that anyway. So let me just press circle, copy, and then we go back up the directory, and then back here once more, and then back to def_usb001, and then we're going to press circle and paste this directory. It's going to take a while because it's also going to upload the entirety of the LittleBigPlanet 3 patches installed, so I'm just gonna skip through this process. Once that is done uploading the files over to the USB, now we can exit out of this MMCM application by pressing down PS button on the controller and then choosing an option quit game, and now we can unplug our USB drive and then plug it into our PC. Now that we have plugged in our USB drive into our PC, as you can see, we have all the necessary files that we copied over from our PS3 to our USB drive. And now we need to go into our RPCS3 instance. Let us launch RPCS3 real quick. And then now, first things first, if you want to import all the licenses, all you need to do is to go into the Xdata folder right here. Press Ctrl A on your keyboard to select all the files that are here. And then we'll drag and drop them here. So RPCS3 will successfully copy all the license files like this. As you can see, it has all the messages of successfully copying the RAP files right here. And now we need to do one more thing. We'll close RPCS3 for a second, and now we're going to need to drag and drop these remaining directories. I need to go into def_hdd0, then game. And now, in the case of if you already have LittleBigPlanet 3 installed, all you need to do is to go into USR directory and then choose all the edat files that are within the USR dir directory. All we need to do is to select all the .edat files, and then same here, we go into this exact same directory, and then just drag and drop them here, and overwrite the files that it finds. And now that we're done with uploading all of the DLCs from LittleBigPlanet 3, we can go back both into our root directory for our USB drive, and as well as the game directory here in our RPCS3 instance. And for the rest of LittleBigPlanet, both 1 and 2 games, when it comes to the DLCs, all we need to do is to select both of these folders. Once again, that will depend on which region your LittleBigPlanet copies are, but you just all you need to do is to drag and drop these directories right here. And once that is done, we can now eject our USB drive because we're not going to need it anymore. And now we can launch into RPCS3 to see if all the DLCs work. If you just go back to the RPCS3's root directory and then launch RPCS3, and then we can launch LittleBigPlanet 2. And then we can go into the store and then look at my stuff, and as you can see, we have all the DLCs that we have successfully imported into our RPCS3 instance right here. As well, we can check out all the costumes. They should also be listed as outfits, and we have them right here. So this is going to be it for today's video. Hopefully you managed to learn how to dump all your games from your PS3, whether that's a digital version or whether that's a disc copy, into PC so you can play these games on RPCS3, as well as you were successfully able to transfer all your DLCs from PS3 all the way to PC on RPCS3. If you have any issues with transferring your files from PS3 over to PC, or just dumping with the dumping procedure altogether, be sure to let us know in the comment section down below. We will try to answer through all of the questions that you guys ask in the comment section. But for now, this is going to be it. Thank you guys for watching. Like the tutorial if you enjoyed it. Subscribe for more content, more tutorials, and just general news regarding the LBP Union or Beacon. And I will see you guys in the next video. This was Kubac from LBP Union signing out. Have a good one.